Okay, happy Easter 2024 weekend is upon us. As you can see, we have moved on from our quad game setup, which was successful at the Adepticon game convention. Uh, Very good comments were received from players in that if you can imagine this being a quad game split down the middle, I don't know if you can see the seams in the fabric, but imagine each one of these things was a quad portion of the game table. Players commented that instead of move, then come over here and move, and then come over here and move, and come over here and move, and then come over there and do combat, they said just make move and combat, then go to the next table, make move combat, the next one make move combat, and the next quadrant make move combat. So it would be a little more organized in each quadrant, and that's what we're going to do from now on. So it's encouraging. It took not that much work, but it involved 4 different eras, and some players did not even have never played the BattleTech game before, so our version of it was vastly simplified, and that resulted in a good response. So the O-ring marking system with the little O-rings for casualties and such, that worked. We do have some other post-mortem stuff and takeaways from the convention, and that is that all the rules for these games, these quasi and historical games, if you will, they have to be extraordinarily even more simplified than before. Why? Because players want to start a game and finish it and then go on to the next, table, or go on to the next adventure, if you will, at the convention. So there's no way that you can have a set of rules that is involved more than a piece of paper. And we had a sheet, 11 by 17, or no, actually it was 20 by 18 or something, and we just written the rules on it. This is how fast the infantry moves. This is how far they shoot. This is the sphere of influence for the commanders, so on and so forth. How do you do radio? Okay, in mechanized thing, you need to have a radio communication. How do you do mortars? And how do you do indirect fire? And stuff like that. So it all fit with relatively large print on this 20 by 18 such, whatever it was, piece of foam core that we had written all the rules on, and that was it. That was the extent of the rules. Even the elephants, how fast they move, how they run into things and then trample or not, and then how do you kill an elephant? Well, okay, so that has to be noted on there. And of course, I brought the printed rules of all the eras with me, but it wasn't necessary, and I didn't even want to do that anyway. When people asked, how do you play this? I said, just move. Just move 3 if it's infantry, 4 if it's, armor or something like that. And then if it's light armor, it moves this fast, or light cavalry, just move. And then we'll get through samples of the combat. But before you even get that far, you need to give them a basic idea of the strategy and tactics involved. So, you even have a few minutes of discussion on the basic tactics of military actions. And then the mechanized thing, World War II, it was a skirmish anyway. So it wasn't that involved, but it did involve 1 tank and 2 armored cars, I should say half-treks. And even that, with about 15 squads of infantry, took up the whole 2-hour span of time to play. Granted, the games were pretty much over before that 2-hour period expired, because the tables are so small, you're into combat almost immediately. And especially in the mechanized and in the Nova game, you're shooting just clearly right across the table. The board, the quadrant. So even though it's hexes, you're shooting pretty far. You're within 1 move and you're shooting something. Okay, so that's where we're at. We're looking at the supersized board game. Doesn't even fit on the camera view, by the way. It's a 6 by, well, it's 58 inches square, 58 by 58. And that's basically 6 feet. No, it's 5 feet, 60 by 60 inches. So it doesn't even fit on the camera view. It's a large board game, supersized, as I say. And if you want to know what it is like, it's kind of like an early version of Axis and Allies. As a matter of fact, the poster I created kind of says that. Forget about Axis and Allies. Play, Excalibur. It's the forerunner of all that stuff. And you could say it's a little like Settlers of Catan and the Catan series, but it's not. It just has miniatures. It's a board game look, which is to say the most terrain you're going to see here of three-dimensional terrain is the little pom-poms that we painted green for the Force. And why is that? Because it just looks cool. Otherwise, we got 3D printed miniatures, and we're using 1/72 scale infantry, which of course you could use whatever size you want. And because of the wonderful advent of the 3D printer, we're able to print just about everything we need for this game. And if you're wondering where can you get this, you can't. The fact is that we took the graphic of this old game Excalibur and we just digitized it and made it big. So if you were going to do it any smaller, well, obviously, faster print time for all the miniatures, but the miniatures, the infantry and the mounted troops and such have to be, of course, relatively small. So 15 millimeter, even 10 millimeter. Would that be okay to do? Sure. But we just like to see big things, right? Big actions. So that's why we did this, and I'll come back with more details as I've already had some videos discussing how we're doing this. We've got a couple of new ideas that are being implemented. For instance, the water mills are the only mills in the game. And what value do these have? They just add money to your treasury if you have a water mill in your manor. And as you see, these are all manors. It's medieval England, so these are all manors. And one of the things that the game was lacking, of course, was if you didn't have access to a river, you didn't have a mill. Well, that's a water mill. Well, what about a windmill? Okay, so what we did is we 3D printed windmills. And now we've got the ability of people that are out in the prairie, like over here on the left. Where's my you can't, I'm off camera. Okay, so over here on the left, there's a lot of prairies and no river access like you see right here. This is all river access. Okay, so if you're bordering a river, you've got a water mill. Well, if you're out in the land, in the prairie, like I said, you don't have. So we got windmills. How many do we have? Do we have a ton of them? Not really. We're printing more. But the question is, how much is enough? How many pieces do you need in the game? And if you have too many pieces, it's going to make it, or even if you have too many players, for instance, the game will take some time. It's a Monopoly game, if you will. So how do you limit that? Well, there's a couple of ways of limiting that. And like I said, we'll come back. As we continue with this series of videos, you'll see how the game has to be limited in order to fit into a certain period of time. And people want to get to a resolution, which means 12 turns, and the game's over. The person with the most money in the end of 12 turns wins. And one turn, say we had 6 players, which I doubt we'll get, and we're going to be doing this at Little Wars. Say we had 6 players, and each one of those 6 players has their own military forces and resources to control, and the properties, the manors, that they have to control. So if there's that many players, you're not going to have that many properties in your inventory. Okay, that's fine. Fewer players, are you going to have a lot more inventory? Not necessarily. You still want to keep the game short. So say there's only 2 players and I'm the judge. Then you basically want to have, maybe just 3 or 4 manors already in your inventory, and the winner is going to be the one who goes from there to the end of the 12 turns, and then that's it. But starting off like Monopoly, and the short version of Monopoly is to deal out the cards, right? So here could be the same thing. Now, would it be advisable for a player to be spread out all over the place? Don't really know. Could be, but you'd have to decide that. If a player is really spread out, they're going to have to be conquering things in their immediate vicinity when they start the game. And that's usually what happens. You start the game in a certain manner, and the next thing you know, if these manors are not already occupied, you go and you try and conquer them. And then you spread from there. So, a parish, just like Monopoly, is all the properties in a certain color. And in this case, the parishes can be, 8 properties. Could you cut that down? Sure. That would be one way of speeding the game up. Is to say, okay, a parish is going to be half of what the total parish is showing, in the rule book. Say the number of parishes or the number of manors is 8. In a short game, you could say, okay, you get a parish if you have 4 properties. Well, what does that mean, a parish? Well, if you've got all 4 of the same color, you've got a parish. That's basically a monopoly, and now you get more rewards. Here's an example. When you have a parish, you basically can put your infantry, or I should say your resources, anywhere you want of the properties that you own. But if you don't have a parish, your properties can only be placed where they're purchased. And that's another break from the original rules. And in a sense, it's like saying if you bought a submarine or something, or infantry or aircraft and Axis and Allies in North America, and you own South America, then you can put them in South America. Well, we're saying no, you can only put them in North America. If the North American values are enough for you to purchase, as many aircraft as you want, you can't stick them in any other properties you own. You got to buy them where you live, and that's another departure. And I think that's going to be exciting to see that as well. Okay, so toodaloo, and we'll come back and we'll continue talking about this.